At 22:47 hours local time on June 5, 2026, in the dust-filled dark of a southern Lebanese village called Kfar Shuba, 1 kilometer north of the Israeli security line, an Israeli Merkava Mark IV tank sitting in overwatch position had its thermals on, its commander scanning a tree line 600 meters east. Nothing was moving. The radio net was clean. The crew had been stationary for 40 minutes, in a position their platoon officer had personally selected as defensible. What they could not see, because no sensor on the tank could detect it, was a fiber-optic cable spooling silently out from a gap in a stone wall 800 meters to their northwest, thin as dental floss, carrying pulses of light that could not be jammed, could not be intercepted, could not be detected by the Merkava's trophy active protection system, and produce no RF signal that would register on any Israeli electronic warfare receiver within 30 kilometers. The operator holding the controller was inside a reinforced concrete shelter 14 kilometers behind the front line, watching a high-resolution feed that showed him the exact exhaust pattern of the Merkava's engine, the exact position of the commander's hatch, and the exact angle of penetration required to defeat the tank's side armor with the 1.2 kilogram shaped charge strapped to the nose of the quadcopter, bearing down on it at 60 kilometers per hour, 2 meters off the ground, threading between trees with the precision of something that had been watching this specific tank for 22 uninterrupted minutes. The Merkava died at 22:48 hours, 3 soldiers dead, 1 critically wounded. When the rescue helicopter arrived 7 minutes later, Hezbollah launched 2 more fiber-optic drones directly at it, one detonating 11 meters from the rotor assembly, forcing the aircraft to execute an emergency climb and abort the evacuation. This was not a one-off. It was the 9th successful fiber-optic FPV drone strike against Israeli forces in southern Lebanon in 72 hours. The battlefield mathematics were becoming catastrophic. A $380 drone was killing a $4.5 million tank and its crew with the precision that no jammer, no radar, no counter-drone system in the IDF's arsenal had yet found a reliable answer to. Frontline commanders were reporting that their soldiers were refusing to move vehicles into exposed positions. The psychological effect alone was reshaping the tactical map, and it was about to get dramatically worse. Because 1,200 miles to the southeast, at the same moment the Merkava burned in Kfar Shuba, the tracking stations of the U.S. Fifth Fleet in Bahrain were already screaming red. At 22:49 hours, Bahrain local time, U.S. Central Command's early warning network simultaneously detected 7 ballistic missile launches from mobile TEL vehicles dispersed across Hormozgan province in southern Iran. The signatures were immediate and unambiguous. The launch plumes matched the Shahab-3 modified variant, a medium-range system with a 1,500 kilogram warhead and a circular error probable of under 100 meters when guided by an updated terminal seeker, a seeker package that, according to NSA SIGINT intercepts, had received targeting coordinate updates less than 4 hours earlier from an encrypted fiber-optic relay station deep inside Lebanese territory. The missiles were not symbolic. 6 were targeted at the Ali al-Salem Air Base in Kuwait, home to the 386th Air Expeditionary Wing and the primary forward staging platform for U.S. airstrikes against Iranian radar and missile infrastructure. The 7th was targeted directly at the pier complex of the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, specifically the berth of the USS Bataan amphibious assault ship, which IRGC targeting intelligence had incorrectly assessed as the USS Tripoli. Iran had been handed precise pier-level coordinates. The question that would keep analysts awake for weeks afterward was by whom? The response was automatic and extraordinary. Across the Gulf theater, every Aegis-capable warship and every Patriot PAC-3 MSE battery activated simultaneously under the Cooperative Engagement Capability Network. USS Cole, USS Gravely, and USS Gonzalez all launched SM-3 Block 2A interceptors from their Mark 41 VLS cells within 23 seconds of detection, a reaction time that would not have been physically possible without the pre-delegated fire authority that CENTCOM had granted to 5th Fleet commanders following the March escalations. The SM-3 Block 2A is the gold standard of exoatmospheric intercept, a hit-to-kill weapon that destroys incoming ballistic warheads in the mid-course phase, outside the atmosphere, at closing velocities exceeding Mach 15. It is the closest thing to a perfect shield that exists, but it is not perfect, and Iran had calculated the precise rate at which perfection breaks down under volume. 6 of the 7 missiles died in the exoatmosphere over the Persian Gulf, their fragments raining as streaks of cooling metal through the clear desert night sky visible from the rooftops of Manama. The 7th re-entry vehicle executed a terminal phase maneuver, a late guidance correction that the interceptor's kill vehicle could not fully compensate for at final approach angle. The warhead did not hit the USS Bataan, but it did not miss by much. The detonation occurred 340 meters offshore in the waters of the harbor, and the blast overpressure shattered windows across a 400-meter radius, wounded 4 sailors on the pier with fragmentation, and collapsed a storage module on the base's eastern perimeter. Iran's IRGC Aerospace Force immediately claimed on state television that it had struck and damaged the U.S. 5th Fleet headquarters building, a claim CENTCOM denied within minutes, but which Iranian media amplified globally regardless. What neither CENTCOM's public statement nor Iranian state television mentioned was what happened in the 7 minutes immediately following the missile impact, because that was when the real intelligence war began. Do you believe America can stop a weapon that cannot be jammed and cannot be tracked? Comment 1. If you think the IDF can solve the fiber-optic drone crisis, and 0 if you think Hezbollah has just made the tank obsolete in the hills of southern Lebanon. Because what was about to happen in the Signals Intelligence Center beneath the 5th Fleet headquarters would change the answer entirely. At 22:56 hours, as damage control teams were still accounting for the pier explosion, an NSA SIGINT station operating on a classified frequency recorded an anomalous event. The post-strike coordination signal that the IRGC typically transmits to missile targeting teams after a successful strike, an encrypted acknowledgement burst that confirms terminal guidance performance and passes updated coordinates for follow-on operations, was transmitted not from Iranian territory, but from a relay node inside Lebanese airspace. More precisely, from a point in the central Bekaa Valley at coordinates that multiple independent SIGINT sources had been flagging for 3 weeks as a significant anomaly, a facility that was producing high volumes of encrypted transmission traffic while displaying the external profile of an agricultural building complex. And in the same 15-minute window that I IRGC Aerospace Force was transmitting its post-strike burst from that relay node, the IDF Signals Intelligence Unit in northern Israel was recording the fiber-optic drone operator control frequencies, the ground-side equipment that receives the video feed from the optical cable, emanating from underground sites within 1 kilometer of that same facility in the Bekaa. The connection was not circumstantial, it was architectural. The Bekaa Valley complex was not just a relay station, it was a dual-purpose military infrastructure hub. Simultaneously, the coordination backbone for IRGC ballistic missile terminal guidance updates being transmitted into Iran, and the production facility for the fiber-optic drone components being distributed to Hezbollah's frontline operators in southern Lebanon, the fiber-optic spool assemblies, the shaped charge warheads, the ground control units. All of it was being manufactured, tested, and distributed from the same reinforced underground complex beneath 14 meters of hardened concrete in a working pistachio farm. A facility that, according to Israeli air defense maps, sat precisely inside the coverage arc of a Syrian S-300 battery positioned 38 kilometers to the northeast, meaning any aircraft attempting to strike it from the west would have to defeat Russian-supplied air defense hardware to do so, and any aircraft attempting to strike it from the east would cross directly into Syrian airspace, risking a confrontation that neither the U.S. nor Israel had authorization to trigger. It was a position that had been chosen deliberately. The entire complex had been engineered to be untouchable from the air through conventional strike profiles. CENTCOM's answer arrived in the form of 2 assets that had been operating in the region for 3 weeks without public acknowledgement. The first was a flight of B-21 Raider stealth bombers, the same platform that had made its combat debut in the Arctic theater months earlier, now operating from an undisclosed base on the Arabian Peninsula under maximum MCON discipline. No radar, no transponder, no active emissions of any kind, flying at 52,000 feet on an ingress route that crossed Lebanese airspace at an angle the Syrian S-300's coverage model had a 9-degree blind spot on, a blind spot that had been identified by an EC-37B Compass, call electronic warfare aircraft that had been methodically mapping the Syrian battery's radar parameters over 4 consecutive nights. The Raider did not jam the S-300. It flew through the one geometry where the S-300 could not see it, using a flight path that had been modeled to a precision of under 200 meters by the Mission Planning System. The second asset was already on the ground. A 12-man Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force team, a mix of U.S. Army Special Forces from 10th Group and Israeli Sayeret Matkal operators, had been inserted into the Bekaa Valley 31 hours earlier by a pair of MEM-H-47G Chinooks flying nap of Earth at 40 feet in total darkness, using terrain masking to avoid every radar line of sight in the region. They had spent the intervening time establishing a hide site 800 meters from the complex's primary tunnel entrance, visually confirming the facility's external profile against the target package, and, most critically, identifying the location of the fiber-optic cable routing that connected the underground production floor to the surface relay antenna array. Because destroying the building from the air would not be enough. The tunnel complex was rated to survive a 2,000-pound GBU-28 penetrator at this depth. What it was not rated to survive was the destruction of the fiber-optic relay infrastructure from the inside, a cut that would simultaneously sever the IRGC's ballistic missile targeting update network, and blind every Hezbollah drone operator in the field who depended on the facility's production line for replacement cable spools and warhead components. At 0117 hours on June 6th, the B-21 released a pair of GBU-57A/B massive ordnance penetrators, each weighing 30,000 pounds, each carrying a BLU-136 enhanced penetrator warhead from an altitude of 47,000 feet on a GPS/INS guided terminal trajectory that had been computed to exploit the specific geological weakness in the Bekaa Valley substrate identified by seismic mapping surveys conducted by a U.S. Navy research vessel in the eastern Mediterranean 3 months earlier. The MOP is the only weapon in the American arsenal capable of defeating 14 meters of reinforced concrete. 2 of them, offset by 1.8 seconds, attack the same breach in sequence. The first creates the channel, the second drives through it. The strike sequence takes 9.4 seconds from first impact to second detonation. The seismic sensors in the Israeli monitoring network at Metula recorded an underground detonation equivalent to a 3.1 magnitude event at 17:09 hours. The production floor ceased to exist at 18:44 hours, 95 seconds after the B-21 strike. The CENTCOM team moved. Their objective was not the main tunnel entrance. It was the emergency communications vault, a hardened subroom 40 meters inside the tunnel system that the facility's operators would retreat to the moment external comms went down, carrying portable encrypted transponders and backup optical relay equipment. The team had 8 minutes before the facility's internal security force, an IRGC Revolutionary Guard detachment of 22 personnel, could regroup from the blast concussion and establish a defensive line inside the tunnel entrance. The breach entry was executed using linear cutting charges on a secondary ventilation duct access that the target package had identified as the one tunnel entrance not covered by the facility's internal camera network. They went in blind in zero visibility dust from the MOP strikes, using thermal imaging through collapsed sections that their pre-mission rehearsal had prepared them to navigate by memory. The communications vault was reached at 01:22:11 hours. The IRGC signals officer inside had already initiated a software wipe protocol on the primary encryption servers. He was 31 seconds from completing it. The team secured the room at 01:22:42 hours. The wipe was 74% complete. What remained, the 26% of data that survived, would later be assessed as containing the complete targeting coordinate database for 6 planned follow-on ballistic missile strikes against U.S. assets in the Gulf Theater, the distribution network records for 2,400 fiber-optic drone units already in transit to Hezbollah frontline units in southern Lebanon, and, most consequentially, the source code for the AI targeting algorithm the IRGC had been using to compute terminal guidance update vectors for its ballistic missiles. An algorithm that, when reverse engineered by NSA analysts over the following 9 days, would reveal that the precision of the June 5th missile strike on the Bahrain pier had not been achieved by Iranian engineers alone. The mathematical structure of the terminal guidance update contained computational signatures that NSA analysts recognized as belonging to a third-party architecture, a nation-state that had not publicly involved itself in the conflict, a nation-state whose involvement in the missile targeting chain would, when formally attributed, constitute a direct attack on U.S. military forces. That attribution would take 3 weeks to complete. The team was extracted at 0147 hours by the same MH-47Gs that had inserted them, flying out under a screen of EA-18G Growler jamming that suppressed every air, defense radar within 180 kilometers for the 9 minutes the extraction required. 2 operators sustained minor shrapnel injuries. No fatalities. In the field in southern Lebanon, the effect was felt within hours. By 0600 on June 6th, Hezbollah's frontline fiber-optic drone teams reported that their replacement cable spool shipments, expected the previous night, had not arrived. By 0900, the production coordinator for the Bekaa distribution network had gone completely dark. By 1200, 3 Israeli armored companies that had been stationary for 2 days under constant drone threat resumed their advance north of the security line for the first time since April. Not because the threat had been solved. Replacement production capability would reconstitute within weeks, and the 2,400 units already distributed remained lethal, but because the supply chain had been cut. The psychological pressure on Hezbollah's operators, who now understood that the facility backing them was gone, shifted the tactical initiative back to the IDF in a window that Israeli ground force commanders had been waiting 3 months to receive. The strategic accounting, when it arrived, was layered and uncomfortable in ways that public statements from CENTCOM did not reflect. The June 5th missile barrage had failed to damage the 5th Fleet's operational capacity. The B-21 strikes and the SOCOM Vault raid had destroyed a critical dual-use facility and recovered intelligence of extraordinary value. The fiber-optic drone crisis in southern Lebanon had not been solved. It had been interrupted, and the interruption had a finite shelf life. And somewhere in the classified attribution report being assembled in Fort Meade, the name of a third nation-state, whose precision mathematical algorithms had guided a ballistic missile to within 340 meters of a U.S. warship at Pier, was being written into a document that had no expiration date. The war in the Middle East is being officially described as winding down. Negotiations are at a rapid pace, according to the president's own words on Truth Social. Ceasefire frameworks are being discussed in Islamabad and mediated from Doha, and it is all true. But the intelligence report, sitting in a classified annex beneath those diplomatic communiques, describes a battlefield that is not winding down. It is evolving. The $380 unjammable drone that killed a Merkava tank in Kfar Shuba on June 5th has already been reverse-engineered by 3 additional state actors who watched Hezbollah use it. The targeting algorithm recovered from the Bekaa Vault is now being analyzed to understand who built it and what else it can do. And the seismic sensors at Metula recorded a 3.1 magnitude event on June 6th that was attributed to a weapon strike. What they recorded in the week that followed from a different set of coordinates 22 kilometers further north was not. The ceasefire may be signed before this video publishes. The formal war may be over, but the weapon that rewrote the battlefield in southern Lebanon in April 2026, built on a technology that crossed from the Donbas to the Bekaa Valley in 18 months, is now in the hands of actors who have no ceasefire agreement and no interest in signing one. And the third-party state whose fingerprints are in the missile targeting algorithm recovered from the Bekaa Vault is watching the American response very carefully, from very far away, taking notes on exactly how much the U.S. found out, how quickly, and what it chose to do with the information. The question that should be keeping you awake tonight is not whether the ceasefire holds. It is this: if a $380 drone can kill a $4.5 million tank and everything inside it, and no electronic system on Earth can stop it, what happens when a peer adversary with a $400 billion defense budget builds 40,000 of them? What do you think? Comment below whether you believe the fiber-optic drone has permanently ended the era of the main battle tank, or whether military engineers are 6 months from a solution that will make the threat obsolete. If this tactical breakdown exposed the weapons development story that no mainstream outlet is covering, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next classified file, covering the Third Nation attribution from the Bekaa Vault and what the NSA's reverse engineering of that targeting algorithm revealed about the next conflict, is already being built, and you will not want to miss it.